Just after midnight, a single royal directive shattered decades of tradition. King Charles, in a move no one saw coming, abruptly revoked Prince Andrew's security privileges. No warning, no explanation, just silence followed by chaos. What could push a monarch to strip his own brother of protection in the dead of night? What secret broke the final thread of royal loyalty? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It wasn't just a decision, it was a detonation. Somewhere between 12:17 and 12:41 a.m., palace insiders claim the order came through a discreet, top-level communication encrypted and addressed to the Royal Security Division. Within minutes, long-standing officers assigned to Prince Andrew received withdrawal notices. By 1 a.m., their posts had been vacated. Guards who had served him for years stood outside the gates of Royal Lodge, waiting for transport. No one had answers, and perhaps most chilling of all, no one had been informed ahead of time. Even the most senior aides had been bypassed, their briefings mysteriously scrubbed. It was as though the directive had never existed. And yet its consequences were already roaring through every hall of Windsor. What ignited such a ruthless break from protocol? That question haunted every wing of the palace the following morning, but for a select few the pieces were already aligning. Earlier that same day, rumours swirled of a tense verbal exchange between Charles and Andrew, an argument so heated that even veteran butlers described the king's voice as unrecognisable. "Colder than ever," whispered one source. What that irregularity was remains unclear, but one thing is certain: the meeting lasted under 30 minutes, and within 2 hours, Andrew's world had been turned upside down. Perhaps the most disturbing element is how meticulously the usual channels were avoided. Under Queen Elizabeth's reign, changes to royal protection required multi-agency consensus, formal review, and written rationale. But this time, Charles bypassed every one of her old safeguards. The Queen's legacy protocols were ignored, erased, and overwritten by a single authoritative decree. No committee, no debate, just the king and his decision enforced with absolute precision. Some believe this was a long time coming. Others argue it was reckless and uncalculated. But what no one denies is that this moment has sent a chill through the royal establishment. It signals a king not only unafraid to wield his power, but perhaps dangerously willing to do so without pause. And if Prince Andrew, a royal by blood, could be cast into the cold in a single night, who might be next? But to understand what could drive a king to break royal blood ties so suddenly, we must go back to the storm brewing behind gilded doors for years. They were born into royalty, but never saw eye to eye. Behind the public smiles, the tension between Charles and Andrew festered like an unspoken curse. For decades, the crown kept their rivalry contained until now. What happened in private, and why did it finally explode into public consequence? The distance between Charles and Andrew did not begin with scandal, it began in the nursery. One destined to reign, the other free to rebel. Queen Elizabeth's parenting, though devoted, was marked by distinction. Charles, the heir, was raised under rigid expectations and relentless scrutiny, moulded for duty. Andrew, the favoured spare, was given leeway and indulgence, a freedom Charles never tasted. Those early divides hardened over time, quietly breeding resentment. While Charles endured years of stoic grooming and emotional reserve, Andrew charmed, escaped, and was shielded especially by the Queen herself. Their mother's differing touch cast a long shadow, and within that shadow, competition grew into quiet contempt. As adults, the brothers forged drastically different paths. Charles embraced the burden of legacy, walking carefully with every step. Andrew walked with bravado and left wreckage in his wake. For years, Charles privately seethed as Andrew's associations and antics drew criticism. But it was the Epstein scandal that detonated a long-dormant fury. Charles, sources say, was humiliated not just for the crown's image, but personally. To see the monarchy stained by his brother's choices, to watch the public question the very integrity of the House of Windsor, ignited something cold within him. He believed in preserving the institution at all costs. Andrew, in his view, had become the cost. When Prince Philip passed, the already fragile brotherhood cracked further. Philip had long served as a buffer, his iron will, his no-nonsense judgment kept internal wars from spilling outward. But in his absence, no one restrained Charles's growing paranoia. In private circles, Charles began speaking less like a brother and more like a strategist. Camilla, ever the confidant, allegedly discussed containment options with aides according to a leaked note. One-line scrib, lead in the margins, sent chills through insiders. This ends only one way, with silence. Whether she meant distance or destruction remains unknown. But one thing is certain. Charles was no longer waiting for Andrew to redeem himself. He was preparing to protect the throne from him. Attempts to mend the breach had failed repeatedly. Charles offered quiet retirements, softened ultimatums, even backdoor exile proposals. But Andrew, once proud and emboldened, refused to yield. He viewed himself as untouchable, a son of the Queen, a man owed protection. That delusion clashed violently with Charles's growing belief that the monarchy's survival demanded brutal clarity. No more negotiations, no more shielding. Charles believed that Andrew had crossed a threshold, not just of morality, but of strategic risk. So when the moment came to sever ties, it wasn't just about what had happened. It was about everything that had built up over years: resentment, disappointment, fear, and a brotherhood that had long since turned to frost. Charles didn't revoke Andrew's security because of one mistake. He did it because he no longer saw a brother, he saw a threat. And once that shift occurs in the mind of a monarch, there is no turning back. But it wasn't just old wounds that pushed Charles to act. It was something new. Something far more dangerous had surfaced. Insiders claim a shocking development occurred just hours before Charles issued the order. Something Andrew said or did inside the palace's restricted quarters allegedly crossed a line no royal had dared breach. What was uncovered in that moment of confrontation would reshape the monarchy's inner circle. It began quietly, too quietly. At 4:30 p.m. that day, a red flag alert was triggered within Windsor's internal monitoring system. One of the secure access points to the royal archives had been engaged using an outdated but still active clearance code 1 belonging to Prince Andrew. According to an anonymous staffer, the code had been dormant for years, archived and supposedly deactivated. And yet, it worked. The prince reportedly entered alone, unaccompanied, and remained inside for exactly 22 minutes. Surveillance footage confirmed his presence, though what transpired behind those closed doors remains sealed. What isn't sealed, however, are the consequences that followed. Within the hour, the head of royal security sent a direct memo to Charles's private office. The content of that memo, described only as urgent and compromising, allegedly detailed Andrew's request to access confidential documents linked to estate transfers, specifically those involving Balmoral and Sandringham. These are not routine inquiries. These estates, layered in legacy and legal complexity, have remained under tightly controlled sovereign oversight for generations. Andrew's sudden interest raised questions, but more alarmingly, it raised red flags about intent. Was he attempting to gather leverage? Or worse, was he planning something that would expose private royal dealings? The urgency grew heavier. Princess Catherine and Princess Anne were called into an impromptu briefing with the king. Insiders say the room was locked from the inside, guards instructed to allow no one entry, even Camilla. That absence did not go unnoticed. For months, there had been subtle tension between the Queen consort and the rest of the senior circle, but this moment made the division concrete. Camilla, left outside one of the most critical meetings of the year, was reportedly unaware of the gravity unfolding just behind the oak-panelled walls. What Catherine and Anne shared with Charles remains confidential, but speculation has surged. Some believe they had long been tracking Andrew's activities through soft surveillance, gathering enough intelligence to justify action. Others claim Andrew issued a threat to go public with family secrets if stripped of influence. Secrets, perhaps, that could undermine the very image of the monarchy Charles has worked so hard to restore. That wasn't just defiance, that was war. And Charles, ever the strategist, chose swift retaliation. The order that followed wasn't born out of impulse. It was cold, measured, and surgically timed. a silent strike, executed before the news could leak or countermeasures could be taken. Because this wasn't just about punishment, it was about prevention. Charles acted not only as king, but as protector of an institution teetering on a generational tightrope. And once the line had been crossed, there was no space left for mercy. But Charles's brutal decision didn't just affect Andrew, it sent shockwaves through every layer of the palace. Security vans rolled away, royal uniforms were folded and locked away. For the first time in decades, a prince walked alone. The impact wasn't just personal. It dismantled a long-standing royal tradition and exposed rifts in the very system meant to keep the crown safe. The removal of Prince Andrew's security detail wasn't merely symbolic, it was surgical. Executed without warning, his long-standing protection team was dismantled in silence. No ceremony, no official transition, not even a farewell briefing. Sources close to the Royal Protection Command revealed that the order came down with chilling simplicity: stand down, effective immediately. Some officers, loyal for over 2 decades, were left stunned. A few reportedly refused to believe the order until the vans arrived, escorted by neutral personnel strangers to collect equipment, credentials, and keys. In one afternoon, a prince who had once been second in line to the throne became a liability removed from protocol. What followed was confusion, then chaos. Conflicting reports immediately surfaced regarding whether Charles had informed the Prime Minister before making the call. Senior government aides neither confirmed nor denied involvement. One anonymous source close to Whitehall suggested that the Prime Minister was only briefed after the fact, a breach in standard coordination that left even high-ranking officials uneasy. The palace's emergency communications unit was summoned at dawn, but no press release came. Instead, Buckingham Palace issued the coldest of statements: no comment. A phrase that echoed louder than any explanation could have. Inside Andrew's circle, the backlash was instant. Sarah Ferguson, blindsided by the abrupt decision, was reportedly both furious and frightened. Friends say she believed this kind of action would never happen without her prior knowledge, but it had, and she was powerless to reverse it. She's said to have made multiple calls to palace intermediaries in a frantic attempt to confirm Andrew's safety moving forward, but none were returned. Silence was the new protocol. Meanwhile, Princess Beatrice was seen leaving a private London residence late that evening, her expression unreadable, her entourage reduced. Close sources described her as visibly shaken. The royal family had weathered scandal before, but never like this. Never this sudden, never this raw. For Andrew's daughters, the implications were far more than logistical. If their father could be abandoned overnight, what legacy would be left for them? At Royal Lodge, tension thickened. Despite growing public attention and quiet suggestions to relocate, Andrew has refused to leave the property. Some say he's barricaded himself emotionally, if not physically determined to remain in what he considers his last sanctuary. His presence, now unguarded, has triggered further debate about exposure, risk, and unresolved tensions with the monarchy. This fallout was more than one man's downfall. It was a rupture in the very fabric of royal order. A system built on hierarchy, protocol, and unspoken protection had just publicly turned on one of its own. But while the outside world watched the fallout, inside the palace, another storm was gaining momentum, and this time, it had everything to do with Catherine. While the chaos unfolded, one figure remained calm, calculating even. Princess Catherine's influence has grown exponentially in recent months, and whispers inside the palace now suggest she wasn't just informed about Charles's decision. She may have orchestrated part of it. Behind the scenes, Catherine has quietly cemented her role at the core of royal power. No longer just the poised consort in the public eye, she has emerged as a formidable strategist, operating through diplomacy, discretion, and a growing command of internal alliances. Recent restructuring within the senior royal advisory team placed her in a position few consorts have held before: direct access to strategic decision-making. And while her rise was subtle, it was anything but accidental. She earned the king's confidence not through noise but through results. Charles, long weary of internal friction and fragile optics, began turning to Catherine for counsel over even his closest aides. One insider confessed, Charles trusts Catherine's instincts more than Camilla's judgment, and lately, that trust has shaped everything. One document, leaked from a private pre-council agenda, now fuels intense speculation. The meeting, held just 24 hours before Andrew's protection was revoked, included a classified session titled Security and Succession Risk. Sources confirm that both Catherine and Princess Anne were present. That title alone is enough to raise questions. Were they already laying groundwork for the operation that unfolded less than a day later? More than a few palace observers believe so. And that belief isn't unfounded. In the weeks leading up to the seismic decision, Princess Anne and Catherine had grown notably close, meeting frequently, appearing together in strategic forums, and most tellingly, voting in lockstep during internal deliberations. This alliance reshaped the royal council's balance of power, effectively isolating voices seen as outdated or misaligned with the future Catherine was crafting. Among those voices, Prince Andrew stood out like a relic of scandal. His approach, his behavior, and his behind-the-scenes dealings clashed sharply with Catherine's vision of a modernized, accountable monarch. One proposal Andrew floated, a property initiative tied to international interests, was quietly blocked by a subcommittee led by Catherine. According to a confidential aide, it was the final straw. She didn't want him punished, the aide said. She wanted him sidelined permanently. Catherine believed Andrew was too volatile, too entangled in the past to be part of the monarchy's future. That philosophy, elegant in its ruthlessness, carried weight with Charles. He wasn't looking for another scandal, he was looking for insulation, and Catherine provided both the justification and the strategy to deliver it. Her fingerprints may not be on the official order, but her influence is all over the chain of events that led to its execution. As Catherine rises in power, her methods remain cloaked in calm efficiency, but make no mistake, there's calculation behind the grace. She is shaping the monarchy's future with precision, and those who threaten that vision are being moved aside, one by one. But if Catherine was rising, then someone else had to fall, and this time, that someone might just be Camilla. Sources describe the Queen Consort as livid after discovering the security cancellation had occurred without her knowledge. Camilla, who once wielded quiet power, now finds herself cut from decisions, and she's not going down quietly. What followed behind the gilded doors of Clarence House wasn't a conversation, it was a confrontation. The moment Camilla learned of the decision, she stormed into the king's private study and locked the door behind her. Staff nearby say shouting erupted within seconds. Her voice, usually measured and composed, rose to a fury that rattled the corridor. "You kept this from me?" she reportedly demanded. "How dare you do this behind my back?" For a woman who had fought for years to be seen as more than a consort, as a partner in power, this was more than an insult. It was a warning shot, and she knew it. Leaked information from her private secretary only deepened the sense of betrayal. In a confidential message sent to a close aide, Camilla allegedly referred to the king's action as a direct betrayal and hinted that a faction within the palace, one she'd long distrusted, was actively working to sideline her. That faction, as many now suspect, is led by none other than Princess Catherine. Their history is no secret. For years, quiet battles of influence brewed behind public smiles. But Catherine's recent rise has shifted the balance in ways Camilla never anticipated, and now she's beginning to feel the ground disappear beneath her feet. Determined to reassert her influence, Camilla reportedly attempted to reverse the king's decision. She demanded an emergency meeting with Charles and proposed reinstating Andrew's protection detail, at least in part, to avoid the scandal spiraling further. But the king, unshaken, refused. His response, described by one insider as chillingly final, left no room for debate. That door, and perhaps many others, had closed. For Camilla, it wasn't just about Andrew. It was about power, about control. For the first time, she realized she had lost both. What makes this even more damning is how quickly Camilla's isolation became visible. Within days of the fallout, senior royal observers noted a distinct absence of her voice in key briefings. Her name was no longer listed on certain event committees. Her own family, usually kept at a cautious distance from official matters, was seen leaving Clarence House in silence, their expressions grim. There was no spin, no prepared statement, just a cold vacuum where influence once lived. Insiders are now calling this moment a pivot, perhaps even the beginning of the end for Camilla's dominance. She once navigated the corridors of power with poise and patience, but now she's being edged out by a newer, sharper generation. The monarchy is being reshaped, not just in structure but in spirit. And Camilla, once indispensable to Charles's reign, may now find herself reduced to a figurehead present, but no longer powerful. As the royal court cracks from within, the public's reaction only adds fuel to the fire, and it's louder than ever before. The British public is no longer silent. From viral videos to leaked texts, the monarchy's decision to isolate Andrew, while long overdue to some, has lit a firestorm of debate. But behind every tweet and headline lies a deeper concern. What if the entire royal structure is unraveling? The backlash didn't wait for a formal statement. Within hours of the security withdrawal, social media erupted. Hashtag abolish the monarchy trended alongside hashtag protect Catherine and the cryptic hashtag where is Andrew, creating a digital battlefield where the crown was no longer protected by protocol, but exposed to the raw judgment of the masses. The court of public opinion had opened its doors and it was ruthless. One half of the country praised King Charles for finally making a firm decision. The other half saw it as a chilling sign. If family loyalty could be erased with one midnight order, what else was expendable? The press scrambled to keep up. Tabloid headlines screamed betrayal, while legacy outlets issued cautious think pieces dissecting the optics of royal abandonment. Talk show debates turned venomous. Was this strength or cruelty, duty or deflection? Analysts weighed in on every angle, but a dangerous undercurrent was forming, one that questioned not the decision itself, but the foundation it rested on. And at the center of it all, one question echoed louder than the rest. What happens when royalty becomes vulnerable? Unverified reports soon claimed Andrew's legal team was mobilizing. Rumors suggested a retaliation strategy, not in public statements, but in sealed documents and private leverage. Some claimed he had recordings. Others spoke of old letters, handwritten and damning, hidden away in country estates. No one could confirm it, but the speculation alone was enough to fuel panic behind palace walls. The threat of exposure now loomed not just over Andrew, but over the entire institution that had spent centuries burying its secrets in silence. Even political leaders couldn't ignore the tremors. Behind closed doors, members of Parliament reportedly reached out to royal liaisons, seeking clarity, seeking assurance. Was this chaos temporary, or was it the first fracture of something larger? Charles's advisors offered guarded responses, but even their composure seemed rehearsed brittle. The monarchy, though ancient and resilient, had not felt this fragile in decades. And then came the streets. Crowds began to gather near Windsor, holding signs, demanding transparency. They weren't calling for revolution, but they were calling for truth. A monarchy, once intouchable, was now being asked to answer to the people. The last time that happened on this scale, history was rewritten. Meanwhile, the online sphere buzzed with something darker. An anonymous thread claimed Andrew had been transported to an underground facility in Norfolk. Theories swirled: exile, protection, detainment. No source could confirm it, yet the theory refused to die. In the absence of answers, conspiracy became currency. The Crown's silence had created a void, and the public was filling it fast, furious, and without filter. But while the world watches the spectacle unfold, there's one place no one's been allowed to look until now. Buried deep within palace records is a single classified document, a memo allegedly drafted by Charles months before the cancellation. If authentic, it changes everything. It reveals this decision wasn't impulsive, it was planned. The discovery of the memo has sent shockwaves through royal corridors. Dated exactly 3 months before Andrew's protection was revoked, it was marked eyes only and restricted to no more than 4 recipients. The content is brief, but its implications are explosive. Titled Contingency Measures for High-Risk Family Members, the memo outlines a covert strategy to neutralize individuals deemed reputational liabilities to the Crown. At the center of it, Andrew, in careful but unmistakable language, The document lists ongoing legal risks, media volatility, and unaccounted financial anomalies as grounds for urgent intervention. One entry, more damning than the rest, references a possible offshore fund traced back to 2017, a detail not previously linked to Andrew in public reports. It gets worse. Legal. Advisors who were looped into the memo's drafting process allegedly raised red flags about Andrew's associations abroad, warning that certain ties, if exposed, could lead to further public disgrace or even legal repercussions for the wider royal institution. This wasn't speculation, it was risk assessment, conducted at the highest levels. The language used by Charles in the memo is cold, precise, and deliberate. Next to Andrew's name, he wrote just 6 words: enough. The crown will not fall under shadows. It was a declaration, a final line in the sand, one that would soon become action. But perhaps the most telling aspect of this memo lies not in its content, but in its signatories. A second draft, reportedly circulated within the inner circle days after the original, bore the initials of 2 key figures, Catherine and Princess Anne. Their inclusion wasn't ceremonial. Their signatures signaled alignment, unity, and silent approval of a plan that would shake the foundation of royal bloodlines. But conspicuously absent from the document is Camilla's name. Her omission is deafening. Not only was she excluded from the planning, but she had also, by all appearances, been intentionally kept in the dark. This wasn't just a sidelining, it was a statement about trust, about loyalty, and about the evolving axis of power within the palace. What happened next was surgical. The memo, once signed and finalized, was not archived in its usual place. Instead, it was transferred under a confidential order to a secure vault beneath Windsor. The vault, known only to a few, is reserved for matters deemed too volatile to ever be revealed to the public. But the night Andrew's security was revoked, that vault saw movement. A trusted aide was dispatched to secure the file in person. No digital copy, no email, just ink, paper, and a key. This document changes the story. It proves that Andrew's fall wasn't the result of a sudden scandal or an emotional reaction. It was the final step in a meticulously calculated operation, one that had been unfolding behind closed doors for months. And now that it's come to light, the narrative has shifted from confusion to conspiracy. Because if the crown had planned this all along, who else is being quietly prepared for removal? But even with this revelation, one final act remains hidden until now, when the crown's inner circle prepares for what could be its most dramatic realignment yet. Insiders now say that stripping Andrew's security was just the beginning. A deeper, more permanent shift has begun, one that redraws royal roles behind the scenes. Charles isn't just enforcing control, he's reshaping the future, and some names are no longer on the list. According to confidential sources close to the palace, a document titled Operational Succession Amendments, confidential, has surfaced, containing revisions that send shockwaves through the monarchy's inner framework. Unlike ceremonial roles made public through press releases, this document is strategic, crafted to redefine the architecture of the royal family's future in private. At the top of the file, one word is underlined 3 times: stability. And what follows is anything but. Prince Andrew's name is reportedly marked with red ink, beside a chilling annotation, no future function. His removal isn't temporary, it's permanent, and it's irrevocable. This is no longer a scandal response, it is a line drawn in the concrete of succession. But the changes don't end with Andrew. Camilla's grandchildren, once whispered to be under consideration for honorary roles in the new royal era, have allegedly been excluded from all planning notes, not by accident, but by design. The shift in tone is unmistakable. The crown's future is no longer about extended titles or appeasements. It is about consolidation, legacy, and a ruthless clarity that has no room for nostalgia. This, insiders say, was Catherine's influence at work again, and this time it's etched in policy. Catherine, now formally listed as senior consort-in-waiting, is granted unprecedented authority over ceremonial appointments and advisory placements, a power once held exclusively by the monarch. This role, previously undefined, signals not just trust from Charles, but the quiet crowning of a shadow queen in all but name. She is no longer just the future. She is the architect of it. Every decision flowing outward from staffing to public-facing engagements must now pass through her office. It is the beginning of a new monarchy, shaped not by inheritance alone, but by merit, strategy, and silent execution. And then there is Prince George. His security detail has quietly been expanded, not just in numbers, but in training scope, hinting at early grooming, rarely afforded to heirs at his age. The message is clear. Preparation begins now. There is no time left for error. If Charles once believed in the slow turning of the wheel, he now believes in acceleration. The crown must not merely survive, it must adapt to, outlive. But the final twist may still be to come. Rumors are intensifying that Charles is preparing to announce an internal reshuffle of succession roles, one that may remove ceremonial positions from several senior royals and reassign them to younger blood. The goal? A leaner, tighter monarchy built for optics, control, and survival. If true, it would mark the most significant reorganization of royal hierarchy in modern history and would confirm what many have feared, that no one, not even blood, is untouchable anymore. The monarchy may survive, but not without scars. And for the first time in modern royal history, it's not tradition, but survival, guiding the crown's next move. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.